My name is Randy Van Dusen, and I have a fighter's heart. Well, a little bit about me. I've been a police officer for going on 25 years now. I'm currently assigned to our air operations team. Held some positions back in canine and worked a dog for about 12 years and had a lot of fun doing that. And then promoted out of canine, went to a fugitive team hunting down bad guys and got exposed to a lot of fun stuff in that as well. And then eventually air operations opened up and I moved over there. A little bit about my fighter heart story is that in 2020, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And that was quite a blow. Nobody wants to go to the doctor and get that news and be told that, hey, you have cancer. And so I've always been pretty strong going through my life and my career, and I like to think I have a strong mind, but that one really messes with you when you get that news. And so you have to dig deep in that. And my cancer story, I had noticed a lump on one of my testicles and went in and went to a doctor's appointment. And I go in about every 5 years or so for a physical. And when I feel like I have to go to the doctor. And so went in to see him and I said, hey, while I've got you here, can you check this out? And my doctor's a good dude, and he's just doesn't really sugarcoat stuff. And took a look, he's like, oh man, that's not good, you have cancer. And that was early in 2020, and that was also the same time that the world shut down for the pandemic. And so getting that news at the same time everybody's being kept inside and the hospitals are overrun, and it's just a huge stress. um, Going through my cancer journey, I immediately got scheduled for a surgery and had one of my testicles removed. So lefty is gone. So he has left the building. And then I went on kind of a monitoring where I was going back every 3 months, and I would go back and do blood tumor markers, they call them, where they just take a blood test and see if you have elevated numbers of certain things they're looking for. And I was good for a while. My options after surgery was you can do a preventive round of chemotherapy, or you can just go monitoring. So doing the monitoring was working well because there's a lot of side effects and risks associated with going through chemotherapy. So went ahead and did just the monitoring, and I'd go back and get my blood tests every 3 months. And that went well for almost 6 months till it didn't go well. And I got a call in September of 2020, and we were coming home from a family vacation. And the doctor was calling me on Labor Day, which is usually never good. That's not good news if they're calling you on a holiday. And my cancer had came back. So they had noticed my lymph nodes had increased, and then my tumor markers had increased. So at that point, you don't really have a choice. You're going to go on chemotherapy. For me, I already had the haircut for it. I was already bald, so that worked out okay. And I tried to keep just a positive mindset on that. Going through chemo was pretty rough. Working at the same time, my doctor initially, when I started chemo, I had to do 4 21-day cycles of chemotherapy. And what that essentially included for my type of cancer was, for 1 week you go in, or for 5 days in a row, one work week, you would go in every day, you get hooked up to a bunch of IVs, and they give you a bunch of chemo drugs that kill the cancer, but they also kill all your white blood cells. So you're pretty susceptible to any sort of sickness and colds and things. So I would go about 8 a.m. to the hospital, get hooked up, and be there till usually just after lunchtime. And then I would go to work every day. And kind of having that fighter's heart was that I didn't want to let cancer take away the normalcy of my life. And so I tried to keep a schedule. And I would be sick and just feeling like garbage, and I would force myself to go to work. Before I started chemo, my doctor wanted to take me out of work for 3 months, and I just couldn't do that. I needed something to live for. And I think having that fighter's heart is that you have a goal in mind. And for me, in this case, it was getting through chemotherapy and to get to the kind of the end of that cancer journey and hopefully kill it off. So I stayed focused on trying to stay semi-normal in my life. I do a lot of ultra running, and when I was doing chemo, I couldn't run those long distances, but I could still run. And so I'd make sure I'd go in the morning, I'd get my chemotherapy, I'd go to work, and seeing my friends at work and coworkers, and keeping that like kind of a sense of purpose and why you're fighting to get through this. And so going to work every day, and then after work I would go to the trails. I like to do trail running over roads, and so I would go to the trails and try and get in a few miles, and there'd be some days that I might get one in and just feel too sick and weak, and you just like, all right, well, I'm going to get at least that one in and get back to the car, come home. And I was trying to keep things normal for my family also, and have a daughter who's now 18, but at the time, she's going through high school, and so you're trying to keep life normal. She's playing sports and things, and so by seeing me go to work every day, she just assumed I was going to work, when in reality I'm going to chemo. She knew I was fighting cancer, but didn't really know or understand what was involved in that. And so just focused on trying to keep things normal in life and not let cancer take away things that were important to me. And for me, that was family and work, and getting out there on the trails and having that outlet. So went ahead and worked through 4 months of chemo. Like I said, I'd go through the 5-day cycle of chemo, and then would have to give myself white blood cell shots that kind of boost your immune system. So you would do that for 7 days. And so either my wife would give them to me, or I would give them to myself if she wasn't available. And you're just giving yourself a shot in the stomach, and neither one of us are medical professionals. So it was a little ugly giving me shots. So that was a kind of a stressful time. And with COVID going on at the same time, you're trying to like not get sick and not die of COVID. So, and with a weakened immune system. So that was obviously just kind of a stressful time. I broke up the 4 cycles of chemo. Each one's 21 days, and that made it 84 days I had to get through. And so we made a calendar. And on that calendar, we were like a little kid counting down to Christmas. And every day you just mark off, all the medications you take. I looked like a 90-year-old person all on medicines. I had so many prescription bottles up of anti-nausea and just all these different pills you had to take during chemo. And so on the calendar, we'd list every single, medication I had to take. And that would give me those little victories. And I think that's important. Anybody going through any struggle in life is give yourself those kind of easy wins and just get through, whether it's 1 hour or 1 day at a time, and those all build up towards your goal. So for me, it was a day by day. We're just going to get through this, get through these 84 days, and that will get us through this chemo. And then we're on to the next thing, which would then hopefully you go back to just scans. So did that, got through the 84 days, and literally right after that, it was right around Christmas time, and caught COVID. And so I had my good weakened immune system, and it's pretty cumulative when you're going through chemotherapy. The first week you're going through chemo, you're like, this isn't that terrible. I feel pretty crappy, but you feel, in my case, just kind of like you felt like a bad hangover just all the time. So I'm like, well, this, I got through college doing this, so I can absolutely get through chemo doing this, and just feeling bad. I also, with ultra running. So ultra running is really running anything longer than a marathon. And so I do a lot of 50 and 100-mile races. And with ultra running, you feel like crap later in the race. You've been out there running all night, you're not eating, you're not sleeping, you're just beating the heck out of your body. And so going through that, I drew a lot of similarities from my trail running into going through chemo and cancer treatments, because you just feel down and you're just sick and you might be throwing up. And so getting through that, like having that, those difficult times that were in my past to kind of draw on was a really good thing mentally, because in your mind, like, hey, I've been through hard times and I can get through this. And then kind of another thing that helped me through going through chemo, when you go in there, I was by myself. Your family couldn't hang out with you or anything because of the COVID restrictions. And you'd be in there and I would look around and there were people that looked much worse off than me. Granted, I wasn't looking in the mirror because I looked pretty bad too, but you'd be looking around and knowing that there's people out there that have it way harder than anything we're going through. And you have to kind of draw on that also to get your mind right and to kind of focus that, hey, I can't have the luxury of feeling sorry for myself. I need to keep a positive attitude. I need to, in my case, fight this cancer and give it everything I can and try to find those victories, try to find that purpose of why you're getting up. In my case, when the doctor wanted me to be off work for a few months, I needed that reason to get up every day. I couldn't go sit on the couch and just watch TV and get my chemo and sit there and be sick. That didn't sound like anything good to me. I was trying to be strong, not only for myself, but obviously for my family and kind of be an example to my daughter too. So I think having that reason is, of why you're doing what you're doing is important anytime you're going through a struggle like that. So went ahead and finished up chemo, caught COVID. The whole family got COVID right at Christmas time. So we had a very quiet Christmas. So, the family and extended family always comes over, but it ended up just being the three of us for Christmas that year. After I finished my chemo, then I went back on to monitoring. And so now I just get my blood tests and also CT scans annually. Now I am 2 years cancer free, and you just keep your mind right about it. It's scary. Sometimes you'll feel something that's not normal in your body and you wonder, all right, is the cancer back? And then you have to kind of push those thoughts out. And I think it's important to just stay focused, stay on the positive, and whatever pops up, we're going to deal with it one way or another. I think another important thing, anytime you're going through any sort of struggle, is you don't have to do it alone. There's friends, there's family. If you don't have friends or family, you have your team of doctors and nurses if it's going through a medical thing, or there's all sorts of groups out there. Going through stressful situations, it's so much easier as a team. I'm a huge team guy. Just being a police officer, we rely on each other just to stay safe and alive. I've been through several officer-involved shootings and different situations where suspects are trying to harm us. And when you're handling those situations as a team, I think that's a very positive thing, and you're going to be successful much more than you're not. It's just important to have that team aspect. So I started running marathons. I was actually working overtime, just blocking traffic at a local marathon called the California International Marathon. And I saw this guy, and it was late in the race. That race has a 6-hour cutoff. And this old dude was hunched over. He's hobbling past me, and he had probably 2.5, 3 miles to go. And he just looked over at me. He's all, "Great day, isn't it, officer?" And I'm like, "It is a great day, man. And you're freaking impressive." And I was not a runner. I'm what you call a husky fella. And so I'm watching all these fit people go by. And then this guy comes by, and it just inspired me. And uh, we have a fitness coordinator on the department, and I hit him up. I'm like, what do I have to do to run a marathon? And he's like, well, you got to run. And so he set me up this calendar plan that was like way too stringent for what I like. I'm pretty kind of go with the flow and just run how you feel. And so I modified it a lot. And then I ran my first marathon in 2004. And California International Marathon, ran that, got it done the first year. And I've run that probably 16 times now. And now a friend and I actually run what's called a pace group. So we help other runners who might either be first timers or people trying to make a certain time. We run the 5 hour and 20-minute pace group, and we help you get to the finish line. We run a steady pace, and if you stick with us, you'll run exactly that time to the second. But I got into ultra running probably it was probably close to 2011 when I actually completed my first ultra. Maybe a little bit before that, I'd run marathons, and I had a friend at work, and he's like, "Hey, you got to try this 50 miler." And I'm all about like bad ideas. So I'm like, okay, that sounds great. What do I have to do? He's like, all right, you just go out there and you run a little slower than the marathon, and you're going to have to eat a lot of food. Like they have aid stations along the way, and you just eat food. And I'm like, oh, I could totally do that. So went out and did my first ultra and loved it. And I was hooked. Running road marathons is significantly different than being out on a trail and you're in nature. And I'm out here in California, and we have some of the most beautiful trails in the Sierra Nevadas. And being out there is just, the time goes by so quick, the miles go by quick, and it allows me to like push myself and kind of control your own pain on ultra runs, on the longer runs, because you can push faster when you want to, or if you're hurting too bad, you can, kind of slow down a little bit. And ultra running, I found, was just a really cool way to push my limits and set new limits in my mind. Being able to go out there and go run 50 miles at a time and know that you can do that, and then say, okay, well, now I'm going to try 100-miler. And I've quit. I've called DNF, did not finish at a few 100-milers. And you get to a certain point where either physically or mentally you break. It's been a long time since I've DNF'd a race, just because now, in the middle of the night, it's freaking terrible. You're 60, 70, 80 miles into a race, and you're like, I have a whole nother marathon to go, and it's dark. You're getting ready to see usually your second sunrise, because typically you start before the sun comes up, and then the next day, for somebody my speed, you're going to see that second sunrise. And when you push through those dark hours, and a lot of times it's freezing cold in the middle of the night, and if you can just mentally know that, hey, the sun's going to come up in just a little bit, and I just have to make it until the sun comes up, or you break up the race, it's really easy to say, I have a whole marathon to go. But it's smarter to say, hey, I know there's an aid station coming up in 2 miles, and you break up the race into those small victories. You're breaking it up into small sections. And I tell everybody, I'm like, you run the mile that you're in. And so in a 100-mile race, you get out there and you might be 40 miles in, which is a really long way into a race. But now you're like, I have 60 miles, and it seems so overwhelming. But if you just run that next mile and tick off that next mile, and then I'm going to run one more, and I'm going to run one more, and you do that 60 more times, you're good. And you're going to get to that finish line. And I think you just have to, you can kind of apply that to really anything in life. That, going through chemo, I just got to get through the day. I got to get to 8 p.m. when I'm going to take my white blood cell shots, and then I'm going to go to bed. And you just break it up hour by hour, and then those hours turn into days. And it's the same thing with 1 mile at a time. Those singular miles, those turn into marathons. And so you're going out there, you're running, almost 4 marathons, 3 marathons and some change in a 100-miler, and you just get it done. But you break it down into those small easy on the brain, because the brain will get defeated way before your body will. And that not only in ultra running, but in medical situations and in cancer, it's really easy to mentally defeat yourself. And so if you break things into um, those small victories and just run that mile you're in, then it makes everything a lot easier mentally on you. Me, to have a fighter's heart means you don't give up. Um, we don't have the luxury in life to give up. People are counting on us. We have family, we have friends. In my case, being a police officer, we're it. People call 911 and they expect us to help them with things. And having that fighter's heart means that you don't give up and you find a way mentally or physically to push through and really complete whatever task that you're working on or whatever you're going through in life. And you always remember just break it into those small pieces and run that mile you're in, and you can get through anything. I talk to a lot of friends. I've had several friends since I went through cancer that have unfortunately started their own cancer journey, and talking to them and just telling them to find whatever that reason is that they want to keep living. We're all dying, some of us faster than others, and we can't control that. And I think it's important to live every minute you have. And the advice I give them is to take advantage of those minutes that you have while you're feeling capable of doing something, because there's going to be a time physically we're not capable of doing something, and that day is going to come for all of us. And so taking advantage of every minute like it might be your last, and just focus on the living and why you want to live. Fight with everything you have. I think that's important. That mentally it's easy to be overwhelmed, especially a cancer diagnosis or some sort of medical condition where you're going to have to go through some serious struggles. It is easy to get overwhelmed, and you break it down. You take that one day at a time and just look around, find your why, and you can't feel sorry for yourself. Bad things happen to good people, unfortunately, and you just have to fight to get through it.